Drones, Jeeps, GPS. You probably wouldn't be surprised to learn that those inventions had military origins and were later adapted for civilian use. But today, we're going to sift through medicine cabinets, pantries, and junk drawers to talk about the everyday things we use that were originally developed for the front lines, from bug spray to EpiPens. I'm Erin McCarthy, and this is The List Show. Let's get started. The next time you're enjoying a mosquito-free afternoon outside, take a moment to thank the military. During the early 1940s, the armed forces were using a repellent that had to be reapplied every 2 hours. Not exactly convenient when you're in life or death situations. The USDA worked for a decade before they came up with a solution that repelled bugs for 10 hours. The Army put the stuff to use immediately, and by 1957 it was available for commercial use. Today we know it as DEET, the compound that's found in a large number of insect repellents. Contrary to popular belief, DEET doesn't actually kill mosquitoes. It interferes with their neurons and receptors so they don't detect human-smelling chemicals like lactic acid and carbon dioxide. During World War II, certain resources were pretty scarce. Some of these materials, like metal and paper, were being reserved for the war effort. Others faced supply issues. When the United States rubber supply from Southeast Asia was cut off, the U.S. War Production Board put out the call for potential substitutes. And in 1943, a scientist named James Wright experimented his way into the original fidget toy, Silly Putty. Created by dropping boric acid into silicone oil, it was a non-Newtonian substance, something which changes its viscosity or flow behavior under stress. It bounced 25% higher than rubber, flowed slowly when not contained, and broke apart when struck. But as fascinating as it was, the government had no use for it. Around 1950, Peter Hodgson helped Silly Putty go mainstream when he realized the unusual stuff could bounce right into toy boxes everywhere. He filled plastic eggs with putty and sold them for $1 right around Easter time. Eventually, after the putty got some positive press, sales took off, hitting 250,000 orders in just 3 days. What classic kids' toy rivals Silly Putty as one of the most enduring diversions invented? Everyone knows, it's Slinky. In 1943, the same year James Wright was conducting his Silly Putty experiments, Richard James, a mechanical engineer with the Navy, was working on a device to help keep equipment secure at sea. One day, as he was working, he dropped a coil of wires on the floor. He watched, fascinated, as they tumbled over themselves in a perfectly fluid motion and rhythm. The Slinky sprung from James's happy accident. He and his wife Betty invested $500 to produce and sell the invention as a toy. It was rough going at first, but after they held a demonstration at Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia during the 1945 holiday shopping season, business improved. When Richard later abandoned his family to join a remote religious group in Bolivia, which is another show entirely, Betty threw herself into marketing the Slinky and helped it achieve the legendary status it holds today. Interestingly enough, the Slinky did eventually find its way back to military use. According to Smithsonian Magazine, during the Vietnam War, soldiers would use Slinkies to get a better radio signal by fastening one end to the antenna and slinging the other over a tree branch. Fun fact, there's 80 feet of wire coiled up in the original metal Slinky. Of course, the invention of the Cheeto itself belongs to what's now Frito-Lay. But without a key little innovation from the military, the world's fingers might be tragically free of cheese dust stains. Scientists had long been searching for a better way to preserve cheese, so it held up in warmer months and climates. But it wasn't until the early 20th century that people like Walter Gerber and Fritz Stettler in Switzerland and James Kraft in America figured it out. They melted cheese, then mixed it with emulsifying salts to create a cheese-like product that could handle high temps and long-term storage. When the US military caught wind of the new processed cheese creation, they were all in. They placed an order for 25 million quarter-pound tins from Kraft to sustain troops during World War I, and continued to acquire the faux fromage in the following decades, buying 100 million pounds in 1944 alone. The initial investment, as well as the military's continued patronage, helped set Kraft up for the success they continue to experience today. But shipping all that water was pricey. So the Quartermaster Corps' Subsistence Research Laboratory invested in further cheese dehydration research. But then World War II ended. Great news for most of the world. Not so great news for the surplus of powdered cheese products sitting around in government warehouses. The government ended up selling the cheese dust to grocery manufacturers at an extremely low cost. Companies like General Foods, Quaker Oats, Kellogg's, and Pillsbury. As a result, all of these companies rolled out products made with powdered cheese, including the company that would eventually become Frito-Lay. It's a bit of a long road to get from military cheese dust to Cheetos, but in the words of Chester Cheetah, it ain't easy being cheesy. World War II helped spark a different orange food innovation. While efforts have been made since the 1920s to sell concentrated orange juice, the reviews weren't particularly positive. When World War II began, it became a matter of national importance to get American armed forces some vitamin C. As food historian Andrew Smith explains, canned juice was bulky and not a great use of valuable metal, while vitamin C pills probably couldn't handle military requirements. Frozen orange juice concentrate seemed promising, but tasted horrific. So scientists at the Florida Citrus Commission came up with a new method where they vacuum evaporated juice and then mixed it with the fresh stuff before freezing it. It was less bulky than the original canned product, and the inclusion of fresh juice made the taste tolerable. Following the war, a combination of factors, from the baby boom to increased freezer sections in supermarkets, helped cement concentrated orange juice's place on the country's breakfast table. Around the same time some scientists were revolutionizing the juice game, others were starting to work on the project that would eventually develop Atlas, the U.S. Air Force's first working ICBM, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. The Atlas missile began development in 1945. But when you have a missile that's just sitting there, rust is a serious concern. So in 1953, a new business called Rocket Chemical Company set out to create a line of rust prevention solvents and degreasers for use in the aerospace industry. 39 water displacement formulas later, they came up with the product now known as WD-40. Superglue has long been the solution to many an accident, but the sticky substance itself was also an accident. During World War II, chemist Henry Coover of Eastman Kodak was working on developing a type of clear plastic that could work for military sites. He was experimenting with the chemical family known as cyanoacrylates, but became frustrated when he found the chemicals stuck to everything, permanently. Since that wasn't useful for gun sights, he put those particular compounds to the side. Fast forward to the 1950s. Coover is developing heat-resistant polymers for jet plane canopies. A young chemist working for him messes around with those same super sticky chemicals, ruining a very expensive instrument in the process. At that point, Coover recognized that what made the compound so annoying could be handy in other situations, and superglue was born. Like the Slinky, superglue went from military project to household staple and back. During the Vietnam War, medics discovered that sealing a wound with superglue spray could stop blood loss long enough to get the injured soldier to a base hospital, which saved lots of lives. It was not FDA approved and meant risking skin irritation and infections, but that was often better than the alternative. Eventually, a medical grade version of superglue was developed. Millions of people rely on EpiPens to save them from potentially fatal allergic reactions to things like nuts and bee stings. But before it was introduced to the masses, the auto-injecting pens saved the lives of frontline military members and astronauts. Let's back up to the early 1970s. It was around that time that NASA contacted a company called Survival Technology to ask for help updating a device called the AtroPen, which contained medicine astronauts injected themselves with if they had an irregular heartbeat while in space. The pen was one of the first auto-injectors available. Prior to its invention, users would have to use a syringe to draw medicine from a vial and then inject themselves. The auto-injectors packaged everything together: medicine, delivery method, and all. Sheldon Kaplan, a scientist at Survival Technology, was assigned to work on the AtroPen design. One of his goals was to find new material for the pen. Glass was too fragile and steel could interfere with the medicine. He also needed to create a pen with higher capacity. The existing pens couldn't always hold the necessary amount of fluid, forcing users to rely on multiple pens and multiple injections. Kaplan delivered, coming up with a tempered glass pen and improved injection system that could hold more medicine. Not only did it work to deliver the medicine astronauts needed, the military quickly found that it was a great vehicle to immediately deliver the antidote to nerve gas and other chemical weapons. Kaplan and his colleagues at Survival Technology continued to come up with additional revolutionary uses for the pen. The most well-known today is the EpiPen, a delivery system for epinephrine, used to counteract severe allergic reactions. This version received FDA approval for commercial use in 1987 and has saved untold lives since. You might already know that duct tape has military origins, but here's the story behind the popularization of the world's most versatile invention. The year was 1943, and a mother named Vesta Stout was working in an ammunition plant in Illinois while her two sons served in the Navy. Part of her job was to help package the ammo, and it didn't take her long to notice how inconvenient and potentially dangerous the seals on the boxes were. Each box was closed with paper tape, and then the entire box was coated in wax to make it waterproof for shipping. The wax coating often made it extremely difficult to actually rip the tape off and get to the precious ammunition inside, and every second counts when you're under enemy fire. Stout wondered why they didn't just use a tape made of fabric. A fabric like cotton duct, for example, which is where this story will eventually end up. But when she brought the idea to her supervisors, it went largely ignored. Undeterred, she decided to go to the man in charge, The president himself, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She wrote him a letter describing the problem and her solution, complete with diagrams and sketches. He received her letter and sent it to the War Production Board, who started looking into her idea. They turned to Johnson & Johnson to make the soon-to-be ubiquitous tape, and the rest is history. And although duct tape comes in every color of the rainbow today, the original color was, nope, not silver, military green. Soldiers called it 100-mile-an-hour tape because it could hold up to just about any condition. And that's no lie. Duct tape has helped hold down parts of particle accelerators and played a role in the survival of the Apollo 13 astronauts. Speaking of names, is it duct tape or duct tape? Either could be correct. It was originally called duck tape because it was made of cotton duck and able to repel water like a duck's feathers. But later on, the tape was often used to wrap duct work, hence duct tape. That's it for this episode of The List Show. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.